Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Today I want to talk about a book that actually goes on sale today, which if you are a millennial, you might be interested in. And that is An Ordinary Age, Finding Your Way in a World That Expects Exceptional by Rainsford Stoffer. This book was sent to me by the publisher in hopes that I would review it, and I've read it, and that is what I'm here to do. So I'm excited to talk to you about it today on its publication day. This is really touching on a specific swath of folks who were born between a certain time period and have come of age and lived certain parts of their lives in different parts of our primarily American socioeconomic world. So the author herself is a journalist, and this book feels that it is a chapter by chapter sort of think piece about various ideas around what exceptional is for folks who are millennials, what is expected of this age group as they think about their 20s, how to live your best life, how to get ahead, what these big milestone markers are, going to college, getting a job, moving away from home, having a relationship, settling down, all of those big sort of what we think of as American milestone type things. And so she really breaks apart some of these and the deep expectation that is rooted in American society of people to achieve those things. And the book is really essay after essay of her giving her thoughts, giving her experiences in interview with folks of different ages, people who have had very different experiences, are from different backgrounds, all conducted, I should say, during, I believe, the COVID-19 pandemic, which gives this book sort of an interesting edge because she can talk about it from the before times and then also how this has manifested for 20-somethings during the pandemic and how things have been exacerbated, how different expectations have grown or diminished, and how dealing with those expectations that do remain has been affected by the fact that nothing is the way that it used to be. The writing is very accessible for a nonfiction / memoir type book. It sort of feels like you have a really, really intelligent friend who's super up on how all of these things happen and what life is like, and has a lot of really great connections, and you're just listening to them talk at you. That's sort of the tone of the book. A lot of it is a very vague, understandably, account of the author's many experiences in her 20s, and again, some snippets of conversations that she has had with other millennials during the pandemic. While it is accessible, while it is interesting, the writing style was something that I think for me I wanted a little bit more of. Because I went into this knowing that the author was a journalist, I almost wanted it to be not necessarily grittier, but I wanted it to be like a little more hard-hitting, a little bit more like having a researched tone to it. I wanted it to be more researched. Understandably, it's hard when you're trying to get folks who are in a variety of different complex situations to do interviews with you either by email or phone or Zoom or any of those things. But it just felt a little bit lacking for me. That was something that I wanted to feel more of. I wanted it to be just a little bit heavier and a little less thoughtful, I guess. I will say, if that tone is something that you like, though, just sort of having someone to relate to, there were many parts of this book where I was like, yes, you've put into words a feeling that I totally understand. I feel like you definitely get it. I feel like you're saying this in a way that other people are going to say, yes, that relates to me, and that's people from older generations or perhaps younger generations even might say, that doesn't make sense, you're totally wrong. There are a lot of moments in this book where I felt like I was reading the words of someone who definitely got it, who felt that they very much understood the expectation that had been foisted on my generation and on me, and then also felt like I could hear the rebuttals of older people, definitely, who were going to try and come for this book. I can already hear the arguments being made against every single point that she raises and really holding up and justifying those societal expectations that have been with American society for ages now. I also want to talk about some of the topics that are covered in this book, things like home, things like college, things like relationships, GPAs, jobs, perfectionism. All of those things are are mentioned. Each one gets their own chapter, each has its own essay. What I would have liked to see, I'm not sure they're organized particularly well. I sort of would have liked to see a cleaner line with a narrative drawing all the way through them. There is a little bit of that. There are mentions to previous chapters. It is easy to see how one idea connects to another, but I would have liked that to be a little bit clearer. I guess my main qualm with this book was the organization and the tone. I guess I was looking for it to be a little bit more like traditional, heavier nonfiction-y and less like a memoir, given that it is considered a social science book. I guess I was looking for a little bit more heft to it, and it wasn't quite there. And in another type of social science nonfiction book, at least from the ones that I've read that have set my expectations, that narrative and that sort of lead through, that thread through everything, have been there in the past. So that's what I was looking for, and it didn't quite hit it there. What I think this book does really well, though, is to bring up or at least allude to some of the root causes of the high levels of expectation and the high levels of exceptionalism that we've placed on 20-year-olds. People who are in the millennial generation, which happens to be my generation, have grown up in a substantial age of change. There has always been some type of conflict, international conflict. I'm not going to use the word war, but there's always been some type of conflict going on while we have been alive, and the strides that technology has made from the time that older millennials were born until now are absolutely enormous. So it's been a massive period of change. Every generation has a period of change, but this one has been deeply significant. And from those changes, you can start to see where the expectation lies. And because there has been so much change, the expectation has not been altered with it. So things like moving away from home, things like going to college, things like getting a job based in your college education, things like the expectation to fulfill all of those different areas of your life has not changed, despite the fact that the world has changed. What was the expectation perhaps in the 1950s or 60s is no longer necessarily feasible in exactly the same way. And this book starts to point out how we need to let that go, because being in your 20s is a difficult time, but it's also a very ordinary time. That point is made repeatedly throughout the different chapters. I wish it had been made a little bit sharper, but she does bring up many, many valid points. And if you are looking for a book where you just want somebody to put what you've been feeling into words, and the struggles that you've been having into words, and the pressure you've been under into words, this is certainly the book for you. Also, it has a really lovely cover. There's also considerable attention placed on social media in this book, and it's mentioned on the cover that social media has long been the scapegoat for a generation of unhappy people, and how social media has fed into the exceptionalism and perfectionism ideas and ideals that we as millennials are meant to be meeting. The author picks apart how that's not necessarily entirely true. Nothing is ever the fault of just one thing in a situation like this that bears so much complexity, but that is touched upon a lot. So if you're interested in hearing someone talk about how what you see on Instagram might be affecting your life in both negative and positive ways, this is also the book for you. Ultimately, I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it. This is definitely a book for somebody who enjoys nonfiction and wants to have a better idea of sort of what's going on right now. If you want someone or don't have someone in your life that you can really, really relate to about these topics, this is 100% a book that you'll want to read. As a nonfiction book, I was hoping for it to be a little bit punchier, a little bit heavier, but it wasn't. It was written during COVID-19, and it's reflective of that as well. I should also say that this was the first book that I had read that mentions the pandemic in a way that will make it exist in perpetuity. So it was interesting to read it while there's still a global pandemic going on, but to read it as, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, as if it were over, that language that exists as if we're talking about something that's happened in the past while we're currently still living through it, was a little bit jarring, but I can obviously see why it was done, and it's the first book that I've read like that, which was really wild to encounter. This book you can find anywhere that you might find your books. Today, May 4th, may the 4th be with you. I hope that you enjoy it. If you are interested in reading this book or have questions, please do go ahead and put them in the comments. Everything that you want to know about us is in the description. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, videos. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Right, May 4th. Right, exactly. Great. Now that we figured out when the book comes out.